Ambassador Velthar stood in the observation deck of the Council ship, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. The blue and green planet looked peaceful, almost inviting. He adjusted his ceremonial robes and tried to calm his nerves. This was supposed to be a routine first contact mission. Another species joining the Galactic Council. Another civilization ready to learn the ways of peace and cooperation. The transmission from Earth had arrived 6 months ago. It contained mathematical formulas, star charts, and messages of friendship in hundreds of languages. The Council had been delighted. Humans seemed eager, intelligent, and most importantly, peaceful. They had even sent samples of their art and music. Everything pointed to a species that valued harmony. Velthar had reviewed all the data during the journey. He learned that humans had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their planet was rich in resources and biodiversity. They had a single unified government that spoke for all of Earth. Perfect candidates for council membership. The landing went smoothly. A delegation of humans waited at the designated coordinates, all wearing formal clothing and broad smiles. They greeted Velthar with elaborate courtesy, offering gifts and expressing gratitude for the Council's visit. The human ambassador, a woman named Sarah Chen, spoke flawless galactic standard. She had warm brown eyes and an easy laugh. Everything seemed normal at first. The problem started during the tour of human cities. Velthar noticed things that made his skin crawl. In a public park, he saw a human child running with a large four-legged creature. The creature had sharp teeth and powerful jaws. When Velthar asked about it, Ambassador Chen smiled. "That's a dog," she explained. "A pet. They're descended from wolves. We domesticated them thousands of years ago." Velthar knew about wolves. They were apex predators, pack hunters, the kind of animal that every prey species in the galaxy feared, and humans kept them in their homes, let their children play with them. At dinner, Velthar's concerns grew deeper. The humans served him plant-based dishes, carefully prepared to meet his dietary needs, but their own plates contained meat, flesh from animals they had killed and cooked. They ate it casually, talking and laughing between bites. Ambassador Chen noticed his discomfort. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her face showing genuine concern. "You eat other creatures," Velthar said carefully. "Yes," Chen replied, seeming confused by the question. "Humans are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. Is that unusual?" It was more than unusual. In the Galactic Council, only 3 species consumed meat, and all of them were small scavengers. The idea of an intelligent species actively hunting and eating other creatures was disturbing, but Velthar kept his diplomatic composure. "Not unusual," he lied. "Just different from my own people." The next day brought more revelations. Velthar visited a human military base. Ambassador Chen had been open about showing him everything, answering all his questions with that same friendly smile. The humans maintained massive armies even though their world was at peace. They had weapons capable of destroying entire cities. Ships designed for war. Soldiers who trained constantly for combat. "Why do you need all of this?" Velthar asked, gesturing at the rows of armed vehicles. "You have one government. No enemies. Why prepare for war?" Chen's smile didn't waver. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It's an old human saying. We've learned through history that peace must be protected. These forces exist to make sure peace continues." That night, Velthar couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what he had seen. The pieces didn't fit together. Humans seemed kind and diplomatic. They spoke about cooperation and friendship. They offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But underneath all of that, something else lurked. He began studying human biology more carefully. The anatomy reports made his blood run cold. Humans had forward-facing eyes. Every predator in the galaxy had forward-facing eyes. It gave them depth perception. the ability to judge distance when hunting prey. Prey animals had eyes on the sides of their heads to watch for danger from all directions. Humans were predators. Their hands could grip and throw with deadly accuracy. Their endurance was remarkable compared to most species. They could run for hours without stopping. They had sophisticated communication that allowed complex pack coordination. They formed strong social bonds and worked together to achieve goals. Everything about them was designed for hunting. Velthar requested a meeting with Ambassador Chen. They sat in a quiet garden surrounded by Earth's strange and beautiful plants. He decided to be direct. Ambassador Chen, I need to understand something. Your species, you are predators. Yes? Chen tilted her head, considering the question. Our ancestors were persistence hunters. We evolved to chase prey over long distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. But we're also gatherers. We eat plants, fruits, vegetables. We're adaptable. But you still hunt. You still kill. Some of us hunt for food or sport, Chen admitted. But most humans buy their food from stores. We've moved beyond survival hunting. We farm, we cultivate. We've built a civilization based on cooperation. Yet you maintain weapons, armies. You prepare for violence. Chen's smile faded slightly. For the first time, Velthar saw something harder in her eyes. Ambassador Velthar, humans have fought terrible wars. We've hurt each other and learned painful lessons. These weapons exist to prevent war, not to cause it. We genuinely want peace. We want to join the galactic community and learn from other species. But if someone threatened you, then we would defend ourselves. The smile returned, but it seemed different now. We would do whatever necessary to protect our people, but we'd rather be friends. Friendship is always the better option. Velthar returned to his ship that evening with a mind full of doubts. He prepared his report for the council, detailing everything he had observed. He tried to express his concerns about humanity's predatory nature, their capacity for violence, their unsettling combination of friendliness and hidden danger. But he knew the council would dismiss his worries. The humans had been nothing but polite and cooperative. They offered valuable technology and resources. They seemed genuinely committed to peace. The Council would see them as another civilized species, ready to join the galactic community. As Velthar's ship left Earth orbit, he looked back at the blue planet one last time. Somewhere down there, Ambassador Chen was probably smiling, already planning humanity's integration into galactic society. She seemed like a good person, kind, intelligent, diplomatic. But Velthar couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just made a terrible mistake. They had invited predators to the table and assumed the predators would be content with conversation. He hoped desperately that he was wrong. The stars stretched ahead as the ship entered faster-than-light travel. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, a planet full of apex predators wearing diplomatic smiles, preparing to meet the galaxy on their own terms. The Korthax War Leader. Thrax studied the holographic display of Earth's outer colonies with satisfaction. 3 small settlements on the edges of human space, poorly defended, rich in minerals, perfect targets for the Dominion's expansion. The Korthax had ruled through strength for 5 centuries. They were warriors, bred for combat, standing over 7 feet tall with thick armor-like skin and powerful muscles. When they wanted something, they took it. The Galactic Council complained but never acted. The weaker species always surrendered rather than fight. These humans would be no different. Thrax sent the standard ultimatum: surrender the colony worlds or face military action. He expected a quick response, probably begging, maybe an appeal to the Council for protection. Instead, the human response came from Ambassador Chen herself. War Leader Thrax, the transmission began, her voice calm and professional. We must respectfully decline your demand. These colonies are home to human citizens. We cannot and will not abandon them. We urge you to reconsider this course of action. There are better ways to resolve our differences." She was still smiling in the video message. That same diplomatic smile. Thrax laughed. These humans were even weaker than he thought. They actually believed words would stop the Korthax dominion. He ordered the fleet to advance on the nearest colony, a settlement called New Haven. Population 40,000. Minimal defenses according to intelligence reports. It would fall in hours. The fleet arrived 3 weeks later. Thrax expected to see civilians fleeing or crying for mercy. Instead, his sensors detected something unexpected. The colony had changed. Every building had been fortified. Defensive positions surrounded the main settlement. Automated turrets covered all approach routes. The open ground between the landing zones and the city had been turned into a maze of trenches and obstacles. In just 3 weeks, the humans had transformed a peaceful colony into a fortress. Impressive, Thrax admitted, but futile. He ordered the attack. Korthax warriors were the finest soldiers in the galaxy. They had crushed dozens of species. A few hastily built defenses wouldn't stop them. The first wave hit the outer trenches at dawn. Korthax warriors charged forward, their battle cries echoing across the landscape. The human defenders opened fire. The weapons were crude compared to Korthax technology, but the humans used them well. They aimed for weak points in the armor. They coordinated their fire. They fell back in organized groups, making the Korthax advance slowly and carefully. It wasn't the desperate defense of frightened civilians. It was calculated, professional. By midday, Thrax had lost more warriors than expected. The humans weren't just defending. They were studying his tactics. Every time he tried a new approach, they adapted. When he sent warriors through the northern trenches, the humans collapsed the tunnels. When he used aerial assault, they had anti-aircraft positions ready. When he bombarded their defenses, they retreated underground and reappeared elsewhere. The second day was worse. The humans started using traps, hidden explosives, false positions that lured Korthax warriors into ambush zones. They played recordings of human voices to draw soldiers into kill zones. They used smoke and mirrors to make small groups look like large forces. Thrax realized something disturbing. The humans were hunting his warriors. They had turned the battlefield into their territory and his soldiers into prey. On the third day, the pattern became clear. The humans weren't trying to win through superior firepower. They were making the battle expensive. Every meter cost Korthax lives. Every position required time and resources to take. The humans gave ground slowly, making Thrax pay for every inch. Then the ships started disappearing. 3 Korthax supply vessels vanished in one night, just gone. No distress calls, no debris. Thrax ordered the fleet to investigate. They found the ships disabled and floating in space. The crews were alive, but their vessels were stripped of weapons and supplies. "Humans," the ship captains reported. "They came out of nowhere. Fast attack craft. They disabled our engines and took what they needed. Then they left." More reports came in from across Korthax space. Human ships were appearing at supply depots, trade routes, and undefended colonies. They weren't trying to conquer territory. They were raiding, stealing supplies, disrupting operations, making the entire war effort difficult and expensive. Thrax requested reinforcements from the Dominion. The response shocked him. "Denied. We're under attack across 12 sectors. These humans are everywhere. They know where our supply lines are. They know which worlds are undefended. How do they have this information?" The answer came from captured human soldiers. The prisoners were polite and cooperative, answering questions freely, too freely. Thrax realized they wanted to be interrogated. They wanted the Korthax to know. "We studied you," one human explained, smiling despite his injuries. "Your history, your tactics, your supply routes, everything you've done for the past 500 years is recorded in the Council archives. We read all of it. We know how you fight. We know where you're strong and where you're weak. You've been planning this, Thrax said. We've been preparing, the human corrected. There's a difference. We hoped it wouldn't come to war, but when you made your choice, we were ready. The siege of New Haven continued for 2 more weeks. Thrax kept expecting the humans to break, to surrender, to beg for mercy. Instead, they seemed to grow more determined. They sang songs in their trenches. They told jokes over the communication channels. They acted like the war was just another challenge to overcome. Then the worst news arrived. A human fleet had appeared at the Korthax home world, not to attack, to deliver a message. Ambassador Chen herself transmitted on all frequencies. War Leader Thrax, she began, wearing that same diplomatic smile. This war has cost both our peoples too much already. We propose a ceasefire. Withdraw your forces from New Haven, and we'll withdraw from Korthax space. We can resolve our territorial disputes through negotiation. Thrax wanted to refuse, to fight until the humans were crushed. But the Dominion's resources were stretched thin. The war was bleeding them dry. The humans had turned a simple conquest into a nightmare of logistics and attrition. He accepted the ceasefire. The treaty was signed aboard a neutral council station. Ambassador Chen greeted Thrax with courtesy and respect. She didn't gloat, didn't mock him. She simply shook his hand and expressed hope for better relations in the future. You fought well, Thrax admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. You gave us no choice, Chen replied. But war should always be the last option. We hope this can be the beginning of understanding between our peoples. As Thrax returned to Korthax space, he thought about everything that had happened. The humans had beaten them without superior technology, without overwhelming force. They had done it through preparation, adaptation, and relentless pressure. They had studied the Korthax and turned their own strengths against them. The galaxy had underestimated these humans. They looked soft and friendly. They talked about peace and cooperation. But underneath the diplomacy was something ancient and dangerous. They were predators who had learned that patience and planning were more effective than brute force. Thrax sent a message to the Dominion leadership, a warning that he knew they wouldn't fully understand until it was too late. The humans are not what they seem. They smile while they hunt. They offer friendship while studying your weaknesses. They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Not because they're strong, but because they make you think they're weak until the trap is already closing. The message was filed and mostly ignored. The Korthax had lost battles before. They would recover. But Thrax knew better. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Korthax Supreme Commander Vextar stared at the casualty reports from New Haven. The numbers didn't make sense. His forces had technically won every engagement. They held more territory. They had destroyed more enemy positions. Yet somehow, the humans had forced a ceasefire. This was unacceptable. 3 months after the treaty, Vextar ordered a new offensive. This time, there would be no warnings, no ultimatums, just overwhelming force. He assembled the largest fleet the Korthax had ever gathered, 200 warships. Enough firepower to reduce New Haven to ash, enough soldiers to occupy the planet for generations. The fleet arrived and immediately established a blockade. Nothing would get in or out. The humans had stockpiled supplies during the ceasefire, but those would run out eventually. Vextar settled in for a siege, 6 months, maybe a year. Then the humans would have no choice but to surrender. Let them eat their supplies, Vextar told his officers. Let them watch their children go hungry, then we'll see how long their smiles last. The Galactic Council protested. Of course, they always did. They sent diplomatic messages and held emergency sessions. They threatened sanctions and investigations. Vextar ignored them all. The Council had no military power. They couldn't enforce their decisions. They were prey animals, pretending to have authority. Ambassador Chen appeared on the council floor to plead for help. She looked tired. Vextar noted with satisfaction. The diplomatic smile was harder to maintain now. "The people of New Haven are civilians," Chen said. "They deserve protection under galactic law. This blockade is an act of war against a peaceful colony." The council debated, and debated, and debated some more. Vexatar knew they would never act. They were too afraid. 3 weeks into the siege, something strange happened. A Korthax supply depot near the border reported an attack. Human ships had raided the facility and stolen medical supplies, food, and fuel. The raid had been quick and precise. The defenders barely had time to react. Vextar dismissed it as an isolated incident. The humans were getting desperate. They were trying to gather supplies wherever they could. It didn't matter. His blockade was solid. Then another depot was hit, and another, and another. Within 10 days, 17 Korthax facilities had been raided across 6 sectors. The attacks followed a pattern. The humans never engaged in prolonged combat. They struck fast, took what they needed, and disappeared. They seemed to know exactly which facilities were poorly defended and which supply routes were vulnerable. Vexatar pulled ships from the blockade to protect his supply lines, just a few at first, then more as the raids continued. The humans adapted immediately. Every time Vexatar reinforced a position, they attacked somewhere else. They were like water, flowing around obstacles, finding every crack in his defenses. They didn't seem to care about holding territory or winning battles. They just kept moving, kept striking, kept making everything difficult. 2 months into the siege, Korthax merchant vessels started refusing to travel through certain sectors. The insurance costs were too high. Human raiders had become so common that trading companies couldn't afford the risk. The Dominion's economy began to strain. Vextar received a message from the Dominion Council. "End this war. The costs are becoming unsustainable." He refused. New Haven would fall soon. The humans couldn't keep this up forever. They were one species against the might of the Korthax Dominion. Mathematics alone said they would run out of resources first. But the mathematics didn't account for human stubbornness. A Korthax intelligence officer brought Vextar a report about Earth history. She seemed shaken by what she had learned. "Commander, I've been studying human hunting methods. Their ancestors used something called persistence hunting. They would chase animals for days, not fast, just steady. They would run the prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The prey was faster, stronger, but humans just never stopped. What does this have to do with our current situation? They're doing it to us. They're not trying to win battles. They're making the war expensive. Every ship we send to guard supplies is a ship not at New Haven. Every raid costs us resources. Every merchant vessel that refuses to fly costs us trade. They're running us to exhaustion." Vexatar dismissed her concerns. The Korthax were warriors. They didn't get exhausted. They didn't surrender. They fought until they won. But the reports kept coming. Raids on mining operations. Attacks on trade convoys. Human ships appearing in systems the Korthax had considered secure. The humans seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. They knew things they shouldn't know. They anticipated Korthax movements before they happened. Then Vextar discovered how. The humans had been talking to other species. Quietly, diplomatically. They had been sharing information with the Zenthari, the Quarrel, even some of the smaller species that the Korthax had bullied for centuries. Those species were providing intelligence, telling the humans where Korthax ships were, which routes they used, which facilities were vulnerable. The entire galaxy was helping humanity hunt the Korthax. On New Haven, the human defenders showed no signs of weakening. They grew food in underground facilities. They recycled everything. They maintained discipline and morale. When Korthax ships intercepted human supply runners trying to break the blockade, the runners fought with a determination that bordered on madness. Some of them succeeded. Most didn't, but they kept trying. 4 months into the siege, the Dominion economy was in crisis. Trade had dropped by 40%. Military expenses had tripled. Public support for the war was collapsing as resources grew scarce on Korthak's worlds. The government faced protests and demonstrations. Vextar realized with growing horror that the humans had turned the entire Dominion into a hunting ground. They weren't fighting a war in the traditional sense. They were making the act of fighting them more expensive than any possible gain. They were proving that they could sustain this effort longer than the Korthaks could. The intelligence officer had been right. The humans were persistence hunters, and the Korthaks' dominion was the prey. Ambassador Chen sent a message directly to Vexitar. She appeared on screen, wearing that diplomatic smile, but her eyes were hard. Commander Vextar, this war benefits no one. Your people are suffering. Our people are suffering. I propose we end this now, before more lives are lost. Withdraw your blockade. We'll cease all raids on Korthak's territory. We can establish a neutral zone and begin real negotiations. You think you've won? Vextar said bitterly. No one wins a war, Chen replied. Both sides just lose different amounts. But this can end, right now, with both our peoples intact. Or it can continue until your economy collapses and my people starve. Those are the options. Vextar looked at the strategic displays, the casualty reports, the economic projections. The human was right. The Korthaks could maintain the blockade, but at what cost? The Dominion was bleeding itself dry fighting an enemy that refused to fight on Korthak's terms. He had two choices: accept defeat gracefully or drive his people into economic ruin for pride. I accept your terms, he said. The smile on Chen's face didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. Thank you, Commander. I believe this is the beginning of a better relationship between our peoples. The blockade lifted. The Korthaks fleet withdrew. The raids stopped. Treaties were signed. The war was over. But everyone in the galaxy understood what had really happened. The humans hadn't won through superior firepower or brilliant tactics. They had won by being more stubborn than their enemy, by refusing to quit, by making the cost of fighting them higher than any rational species would pay. On Earth, military historians studied the conflict and smiled. Their ancestors had once chased antelope across the African plains for days until the animals collapsed. Now their descendants had chased an empire across the stars until it couldn't run anymore. The method had changed. The principle remained the same. Humans were persistence hunters, and in the vast hunting ground of space, they had just proven they were still apex predators. Ambassador Chen stood on the observation deck of her ship, watching New Haven begin its recovery. The colony had held. Her people had held. Not through strength or technology, but through the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity from the caves to the stars. She smiled her diplomatic smile, thinking about the future. The galaxy was learning what humans were capable of. Soon they would understand that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't violence. It was the refusal to stop. Council member Zarathil had lived for 200 years. She had seen species rise and fall. She had witnessed wars, treaties, and countless diplomatic negotiations. She thought she understood how civilizations worked. Then she started reading human literature, and everything she knew became uncertain. The investigation began after the Korthaks War. The Council wanted to understand these humans who had defeated a warrior empire through economics and stubbornness. They assigned a team to study Earth's culture, history, and psychology. Zarathil volunteered to lead the research. She expected to find military manuals and battle strategies. Instead, she found something far more disturbing. Human children's stories were filled with violence, tales of heroes fighting monsters, stories about clever prey animals outwitting predators, narratives where the small and weak defeated the large and strong through intelligence and determination. Even their bedtime stories prepared children for conflict. One story particularly bothered her. It was about three small creatures called pigs who built houses to protect themselves from a wolf. The wolf destroyed two houses easily, but the third pig had built a fortress. The wolf tried everything to get inside. Eventually, the pig boiled the wolf alive in a pot. "They tell this to children?" Zarathil asked her assistant, a young Zenthari researcher. "It's considered a classic," the assistant replied, reading from the database. "The moral is about hard work and preparation. The pig who took time to build properly survived. The moral is that if you can't run from predators, you kill them," Zarathil corrected. "This isn't a story about construction. It's a story about turning your home into a fortress and your enemy into dinner." The research continued. Human entertainment was full of end-of-the-world scenarios, movies about alien invasions, books about zombie outbreaks, television shows about surviving in hostile environments. They consumed stories about their own extinction for fun. "Why are they so obsessed with apocalypse scenarios?" Zarathil wondered aloud. She found the answer in human psychology texts. Humans had something called threat assessment compulsion. They constantly imagined worst-case scenarios and planned how to survive them. It was an evolutionary trait. Their ancestors who prepared for danger survived. The ones who didn't became prey. Even in peace, humans were planning for war. The biological reports made everything worse. Humans had evolved from persistence hunters, yes, but the details were terrifying. On Earth, humans were slower than most predators, weaker than most large animals. They had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor, so they invented weapons and kept inventing better ones. For tens of thousands of years, they had developed thousands of different ways to kill: spears, arrows, swords, guns, bombs, chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. Every few generations, they invented a new method of destruction. Then they wrote rules about which weapons were acceptable and which weren't. "They have laws about how to properly conduct war," Zarathil reported to the council. "The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, international humanitarian law. They created legal frameworks to make warfare more efficient and less cruel." "That sounds civilized," Council Member Boreth suggested hopefully. "They needed those laws because they were too good at killing each other," Zarathil explained. "They invented weapons so terrible that they had to agree not to use them. Chemical weapons that dissolve lungs, biological agents that cause hemorrhaging, nuclear bombs that can destroy entire cities. They have all of these, and they chose not to use them because they're too effective." The council chamber fell silent. Zarathil continued her presentation. "Humans also have a concept called spite. It means harming yourself just to harm an enemy more. They have multiple words for this idea: revenge, retribution, payback. They consider it a virtue to punish those who wrong them, even at great personal cost." "That's irrational," another council member protested. "It's a deterrent strategy," Zarathil corrected. "If everyone knows you'll retaliate regardless of the cost to yourself, they're less likely to attack you in the first place. Humans have used this approach for their entire history." She displayed a quote from human literature on the main screen. Words from a poem called "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night." "Rage. Rage against the dying of the light," she read. "This is how humans face death. Not with acceptance, not with peace, with anger and defiance. They refuse to surrender even when surrender is logical." Ambassador Velthar, who had conducted the first contact mission, stood to speak. His voice was quiet but firm. "I tried to warn the council," he said. "I saw what they were from the beginning: forward-facing eyes, persistence-hunting adaptations, cooperative pack behavior. Everything about their biology screams predator. But we didn't listen because they smiled and spoke about peace. They do want peace, Zarathil said. That's what makes them so dangerous. They're not mindless aggressors. They're intelligent predators who understand that cooperation is more effective than conflict. But their definition of cooperation includes the implicit threat of what happens if you don't cooperate. She brought up Earth's history of warfare. The images were disturbing. Humans fighting humans with primitive weapons, then more advanced weapons, then weapons that could end all life on their planet. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, Zarathil explained. Nuclear weapons, climate change, biological weapons. Each time they came close to extinction, they pulled back at the last moment. They learned to cooperate not out of kindness, but out of survival necessity. So their diplomatic nature is just self-preservation? Someone asked. It's more complex than that, Zarathil said. Humans genuinely value peace and cooperation, but they also prepare for every possible threat. They hope for the best while planning for the worst. It's not contradictory to them, it's just practical. She displayed analysis of human pack behavior. Humans formed incredibly strong social bonds. They would sacrifice themselves for their families, their communities, their species. They had concepts like honor, loyalty, and duty that compelled them to protect their group at any cost. They're naturally cooperative, Zarathil explained, but their cooperation evolved for hunting. They worked together to take down threats larger than any individual could face. When humans say, "We're all in this together," they mean it. But what they're in together is often a hunt. The Council reviewed data on human military organization. Humans had refined warfare into a science. They had special forces, strategic planning, psychological operations, intelligence gathering. They studied their enemies obsessively. They learned from every defeat. They never stopped adapting. After the Korthax War, we captured some human soldiers for questioning, a Korthax representative said. They were polite, cooperative, and answered all our questions freely. We thought they were weak. Later we realized they wanted us to know what they were capable of. They were sending a message through their prisoners. Psychological warfare, Zarathil confirmed, making the enemy question themselves, making the cost of fighting seem higher than it actually is. Humans are very good at this. She pulled up records of Ambassador Chen's negotiations. Every gesture, every word, every smile was calculated for maximum effect. Chen genuinely wanted peace, the analysis showed. But she was also prepared for war at every moment. Her diplomatic approach was another form of hunting strategy. Study the target. Find the most efficient path to the goal. Adapt as needed. I've studied Chen's background, Zarathil said. Before becoming an ambassador, she was a military strategist. She has degrees in psychology, game theory, and interspecies communication. Earth doesn't send naive diplomats. They send hunters who have learned that words are often more effective than weapons. The final piece of evidence disturbed the Council most. Humans had domesticated dozens of predator species, wolves into dogs, wild cats into pets. They had taken apex predators and turned them into companions through patience, food, and selective breeding. They turned predators into pack members, Zarathil said. They saw dangerous animals and thought these could be useful allies. They didn't fear predators, they recruited them. Council member Boreth, who had been skeptical throughout the presentation, finally spoke. What are you suggesting? That we should fear humanity? I'm suggesting we should respect them, Zarathil replied, and understand them. Humans are predators who learned that cooperation is the ultimate hunting strategy. They're not evil. They're not monsters. They're just very, very good at surviving. And now they're part of the galactic community. So what do? Someone asked. We make sure they stay on our side, Velthar said quietly. We make sure humanity sees the Council as their pack, not their prey. Because if humans decide we're a threat... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Zarathil concluded her report with a final observation. Humans have a saying, never corner a rat. It means even small, weak creatures are dangerous when they have nothing to lose. Humans aren't small or weak. They're apex predators with nuclear weapons and the stubbornness to chase prey across continents. What do you think happens if we corner them? The Council voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership, not because they wanted human participation, because they were terrified of what would happen if they didn't. Ambassador Chen accepted the invitation with her characteristic diplomatic smile. She thanked the Council for their trust and promised humanity would be a valuable ally. Watching her on the screen, Zarathil noticed the smile didn't reach Chen's eyes. Those eyes were constantly scanning, assessing, calculating. The eyes of a predator evaluating everything around her. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity wasn't playing at diplomacy. They were hunting long-term goals with the patience their ancestors had used to run down prey. And right now, the goal was galactic integration. What happened after humans achieved that goal, Zarathil couldn't predict. But she was certain of one thing. The galaxy would never be the same again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours. Council members from 43 species filled the chamber, their voices rising in panic. On the main display, a 3-dimensional map showed the advance of the Vex swarm. 3 sectors lost in 2 months. 15 billion casualties. 27 colonies destroyed. The Vex were unlike anything the galaxy had faced before. They were a hive mind, millions of individual organisms controlled by a single consciousness. They consumed everything in their path, breaking down matter to fuel their expansion. They didn't negotiate. They didn't retreat. They just spread like a disease across space. Council member Zarathil watched the projections with growing dread. At current rates, the Vex would reach Council core worlds in 4 months. Every species that had tried to fight them had been overwhelmed or forced to flee. The Vex adapted to every defense, overcame every weapon, and absorbed every strategy. "We must evacuate," Council member Borith said, his voice shaking. "We cannot fight them. Our only option is to flee and hope they stop spreading eventually." "Flee where?" someone shouted. "The Vex are everywhere." The debate continued in circles. Evacuate or surrender, run or hide. Every option led to extinction or displacement. The Council had no military tradition. They had relied on diplomacy for thousands of years. They didn't know how to fight a war, especially against an enemy that couldn't be negotiated with. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, listening. She had been on the Council for 6 months now, observing and learning. She understood the dynamics. The Council could organize trade agreements and cultural exchanges brilliantly. But warfare was completely outside their experience. When Borith called for a vote on evacuation, Chen stood up. "The human delegation requests permission to speak." The chamber fell silent. Humans were still new to the Council. They had fought one war and won, but many species still saw them as unpredictable and dangerous. Chen walked to the speaker's platform, her expression serious but calm. "Evacuation is one option," she said, "but there's another. We fight." "The Vex cannot be defeated," Zarathil said. "They've destroyed every military force sent against them." "Every force fighting alone," Chen corrected. "The Vex have never faced coordinated resistance from multiple species working together. They've adapted to individual tactics, but we can adapt faster." "Humans have no experience fighting the Vex," Borith protested. "True," Chen admitted, "but we have experience studying enemies and finding their weaknesses. We've reviewed all the data from previous Vex encounters. We believe they can be stopped, if the Council is willing to try." "What are you proposing?" Zarathil asked carefully. "A joint military operation. Every species contributes what they do best. The Zenthari have excellent defensive technology. The Quarrel have adaptive shielding. The Korthax have experienced warriors. And yes, humans can contribute tactical coordination and strategic planning. Together, we might achieve what no single species could do alone. The chamber erupted in debate. The idea was unprecedented. The Council had never organized a military operation. Many species didn't even have standing armies. How could they possibly coordinate such an effort? War leader Thrax of the Korthax stood. The massive warrior looked at Chen with something that might have been respect. "The humans defeated my people through coordination and adaptability," he said. "I didn't understand it at the time, but I've learned. If Ambassador Chen believes this can work, the Korthax Dominion will contribute our forces." Other species began to volunteer, slowly at first, then faster. The alternative was extinction. At least fighting gave them a chance. Chen transmitted a detailed operational plan. It was complex and required unprecedented cooperation. Each species would have specific roles based on their strengths. The Zenthari would establish defensive networks. The Quarrel would provide mobile shields. The Korthax would serve as frontline warriors. Humans would coordinate the overall strategy and handle adaptive tactics. "This is insane," Boreth muttered. "It's a hunt," Chen replied simply. "The Vex are the predator. We're making ourselves into a bigger predator." The operation was called Unity Defense. Humanity took the lead in planning, but they insisted every species have input. They studied the Vex behavior patterns obsessively. They identified weaknesses. They developed counters for every adaptation the Vex had shown. The first battle took place at the Corinth system, a strategic choke point the Vex would have to pass through to reach Council Core worlds. The Unity Defense Fleet assembled, 300 ships from 20 different species, all following a coordinated battle plan. The human admiral in charge was Marcus Torres, a veteran of the Korthax conflict. He stood on the bridge of the flagship, studying tactical displays. "Remember," he broadcast to all ships, "we're not fighting to win individual engagements. We're fighting to make the Vex adapt in specific ways. Every move we make teaches them something. We control what they learn." The Vex arrived in overwhelming numbers, thousands of bioships, all connected to the hive mind. They used their standard tactics, swarm smaller vessels, adapt to weapons fire, overwhelm defensive positions through sheer numbers. But Unity Defense didn't use standard tactics. The Zenthari defensive satellites didn't try to destroy Vex ships. They channeled them into specific approach vectors. The Quarrel shields didn't protect individual ships. They created corridors that forced the Vex to bunch together. The Korthax warriors didn't charge forward. They waited in prepared positions. When the Vex entered the kill zones, the traps sprang. Coordinated fire from multiple species hit the Vex simultaneously, not random shooting, calculated volleys that targeted the Vex's communication nodes and disrupted the hive mind's coordination. For the first time, the Vex showed confusion. Their ships broke formation. Individual organisms acted independently without the hive mind's control. The Unity Defense pressed the advantage. Admiral Torres watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. The Vex were adapting, yes, but they were adapting in predictable ways because the humans had forced them into specific situations. It was like herding prey into a box canyon. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the Vex had been pushed back with significant casualties. More importantly, Unity Defense had proven the concept worked. Coordinated resistance could beat the swarm. The second battle went even better. Unity Defense refined their tactics based on what they'd learned. They introduced new elements. Human ships used psychological warfare, broadcasting patterns that confused the hive mind. Zenthari scientists developed weapons that disrupted Vex communication. Korthax warriors learned to target specific Vex organisms that served as local coordinators. The Vex adapted again. They changed their approach patterns. They developed new bioship variants. They tried to overwhelm specific species within the fleet. But Unity Defense adapted faster. Because they weren't one mind trying to control everything, they were multiple species sharing information and responding independently. The Vex had to predict 20 different tactical approaches simultaneously. It was like fighting 20 enemies at once. Over 6 months, Unity Defense fought 17 major battles. They lost some. The casualties were terrible. Whole ships were destroyed. Thousands died. But they learned from every engagement. They got better at coordinating. They started to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Ambassador Chen visited the front lines between battles. She met with soldiers from every species. She listened to their concerns and brought them back to the command staff. She made sure everyone understood they were part of something larger than themselves. "This is what humanity does best," Admiral Torres explained to a group of Zenthari officers. "We build packs. We take individuals and turn them into a team. It's how our ancestors hunted. It's how we survived on Earth. And now it's how we'll survive the Vex." The final battle came at the Vex's main hive cluster. Intelligence had identified a central consciousness node, a massive organic structure that coordinated the entire swarm. Destroying it wouldn't kill the Vex, but it would fragment them into smaller, manageable groups. The assault was the largest military operation in galactic history. 500 ships, soldiers from 30 species, all coordinated through a command structure humanity had designed, but every species had input on. The Vex defended their hive with desperate ferocity. Bioships swarmed from every direction. The battle became chaos. Ships exploded. Communication lines were disrupted. Parts of the fleet lost contact with command. But the training held. Each species knew their role. When the Zenthari defensive network failed in one sector, the Quarrel shields covered the gap. When Korthak's warriors were overwhelmed, human rapid response teams provided support. When human ships were damaged, species with better engineering repaired them on the fly. It was messy, it was improvised, it was nothing like the careful plans. But it worked because everyone understood the goal and adapted to achieve it. Admiral Torres's ship reached the hive node. The final assault required entering the structure itself. Korthak's warriors and human marines fought side by side through organic corridors. Zenthari drones mapped the interior while Quarrel shields protected the advance. The hive mind fought back with everything it had. The corridors tried to trap them. Bioweapons attacked from all angles. The structure itself became a weapon, but the assault teams kept moving. When one path was blocked, they found another. When weapons failed, they improvised. When soldiers fell, others took their place. Thrax himself led the final charge to the central chamber. The massive Korthak's warrior fought with controlled fury, his human training evident in every calculated move. Behind him, a human sergeant named Maria Rodriguez covered his flank, her rifle picking off threats with precision. "For the Council!" Thrax roared, driving his blade into the hive node. The structure shuddered. The Vex ships outside went still, their coordination severed. Unity Defense pressed forward, destroying the now isolated Vex vessels. The battle was won. The war took another year to finish. The scattered Vex groups were hunted down or pushed into remote sectors. But the real victory had already happened. The galaxy had learned to fight as one organism. At the council chamber, they held a ceremony to honor the fallen. Thousands of names from dozens of species. Ambassador Chen stood with the other delegates, mourning the cost, but recognizing the necessity. The Council offered humanity a permanent leadership position in galactic defense. Chen accepted with her characteristic diplomatic smile. "We're honored," she said. "But this victory wasn't just humanity's. Every species contributed. Every species adapted. That's the real lesson here. We're stronger together than apart." Zarathil watched Chen's speech and understood the final truth about humanity. They weren't conquerors. They were pack builders. They saw the galaxy not as territory to claim, but as a pack to strengthen. Humans had brought their ancient hunting strategies to the stars, but they'd evolved those strategies. Now, instead of hunting prey, they hunted challenges. Instead of killing enemies, they built alliances. They were still predators at their core, but they'd learned to hunt solutions instead of victims. The galaxy had been saved, not by human strength alone, but by humanity's ability to turn disparate species into a coordinated pack. They'd taught the Council to fight like Earth's pack hunters, coordinated, adaptive, relentless. Ambassador Chen returned to her office after the ceremony. She looked at Earth through her window, that small blue planet where apex predators had learned to smile and shake hands instead of killing everything they met. The smile on her face was genuine now. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or servants, but as the species that understood how to turn individuals into teams and teams into family. The galaxy would never forget the lesson. Humans were apex predators, but their most dangerous trait wasn't violence. It was the ability to make anyone and everyone part of their pack. And once you were in the pack, humans would defend you with the same stubborn persistence they'd once used to chase prey across ancient plains. The future was uncertain. New threats would emerge. But the galaxy now had something it never had before. Unity forged in fire, taught by the species that understood cooperation wasn't weakness. It was the ultimate hunting strategy.